What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Thoughts with Nick. As you can see, we've got some snow on the ground. It's been falling on and off the past couple days, and it continues to fall as we speak. And I gotta say, I love it. Ever since I was a kid, I've totally enjoyed the snow, playing in the snow. I think it's so beautiful, peaceful, calming, serene. The list of descriptive words can go on and on, but I think it's just so nice to be able to look back, see the flakes falling down, floating down to you, and I don't know, it's just really awesome, I think. But anyway, without further ado, we'll get things started with the quote, and today's quote comes from Oscar Wilde, and what he said was, "The emotions of man are stirred more quickly than man's intelligence." And if you're not familiar with Oscar Wilde, he was an Irish playwright, poet, and novelist, although to my knowledge, he only wrote one novel, which is called The Picture of Dorian Gray. That's actually the only work of his that I'm personally familiar with. I read that. I haven't read any of his poems, haven't read any of his plays or anything. But The Picture of Dorian Gray, it was a pretty interesting book. It was a good moral commentary. I'd recommend it. But anyway, what I want to talk about today is emotional intelligence. And I feel like that quote is very concise, one sentence to the point, and I really couldn't have summarized it better myself. When a situation strikes you emotionally, you're going to be way more likely to react in a split-second fashion, so to speak, rather than letting logic and reason take place within your brain. And it's not really where you want to operate from. It's not rational. And in those situations, when you're hit emotionally, when you're in an emotionally charged situation, you got to kind of take a step back and try and internalize your feelings and internalize and interpret that state. Otherwise, you're going to be ruled by your emotions. Your emotions are going to be dictating your reactions. Your emotions are going to have control over you rather than you having control over your emotions. And that's not the place you want to be. Then you're beholden to something that you have the capacity to control. And I don't want to go as far as to say it's dangerous. I mean, it can be dangerous, like certain shit, people let emotions rule them. Next thing you know, they're fucking firing off guns and shit like that. So I guess you could say it's dangerous, but the word I was going to go with is damaging, because what I think of is like a situation where you're aggravated, frustrated for whatever situation. Maybe as a common example would be something going on at work that you then take home and take out on your family. I think a lot of people probably can relate to this. I mean, if not personally, maybe someone told, I think that's a really relatable example of some stress at the workplace, a shitty day, and then you come home and you're in a funk, and your family's undeserving of your affliction, I guess you could say. It's not their fault, but regardless, they're the ones who get the brunt of your aggravation. And it's not fair, it's not cool, and it goes back to something I was talking about in my video on judgment, which is projection. So in these situations, when you allow your emotions to control your actions rather than controlling your emotions and thus being in control of your actions, you're projecting an internal state externally on undeserving parties. And it's not fair. It's, like I said already, it's not cool. And I think this is the part that's really damaging to interpersonal relationships, because the other person, if this is a continuous occurrence, they know that it's not their fault. Like, they know they haven't warranted your wrath. They know it's not related to them, and yet they're taking the brunt of it. They're taking the heat, and they're going to distance themselves from you because they don't deserve that treatment, and they're aware of it. And that's, you want to be able to maintain those relationships, whether it's friendship, whether it's family, whatever it is. You don't want to end up losing those connections to the people that are important to you solely because you can't control your emotions and you have no level of emotional intelligence. And, what I mean, I guess I probably should have explained this at the beginning. When I say emotional intelligence, is like a way to gauge your internal state and interpret, okay, I'm frustrated. Where is this frustration coming from? How can I kind of come to terms with it rather than letting it eat me up inside? Or I'm angry. Why am I angry? Where's this anger coming from? Is it rational? What's a healthy outlet for it rather than expressing it onto those close to me who love me and, just want me to love them back in that same respect. So that's kind of what I mean by emotional intelligence. And I feel like it's really lacking today. And I don't want to generalize. Maybe I'm just speaking from my experience as a man, but I feel like it's a problem that affects men a lot because it can be difficult to express your emotional state. It can be hard to, level with someone and say, I'm feeling X because of Y. You know what I mean? It's sometimes hard to tie the emotional state with events that happen, or, maybe it's not even something that happened. Maybe you just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, as they say. And nonetheless, that's no excuse to be a dick to other people just because you're feeling shitty or you had a shitty day. There's no excuse for it. You have to maintain a consistent countenance externally. You have to continue to put forward the same disposition towards other people. It's comforting when you're like that. They know they can go to you and they're going to get the same thing. They know if they come to me, for example, I'm much better now than I was in some of my younger years, but I don't know. Like, I feel like I hope people feel like they can come to me and I'll hear them out and I'll be rational, and shit like that. Whereas in the past, I don't know. I don't know that I've ever been someone to really fly off the handle unless something crazy's going down. Then I just, back in the day, might have just got right to it. But that's whatever. That's times past. Anyway, you want people to be able to, the point being, you want people to be able to go to you and be comfortable going to you and know that you're not going to be acting different on a given day. You're going to be maintaining the same personal disposition towards them that you displayed the last time you interacted, ideally, and that provides a sense of comfort and security and a level of trust because they know that they can count on you to be almost like a calm within the storm. You can weather the storm and come out on the other side better for it. And when they're having difficult times, they can rely on you to maintain even keel and guide them through the situation. And you don't necessarily have to be that person that people go to, but just in general, like, it's better for you mentally to know that you're able to maintain that level of discipline and composure, because you don't want to look back on your day and be like, wow, I was a total asshole to, this person today, and it had nothing to do with them. That's going to lead to a lot of regret on your part, and that's a result of the projection, like I mentioned. When you're projecting your external state, or you're projecting your internal state rather externally, it's going to probably lead to a lot of regret because you're mishandling situations, you're mistreating people, and you're going to know you fucked up. You're going to know you were out of line with things that you said or ways that you acted, and you're probably going to end up hoping that the other person, will forgive you for it, or will maybe not have noticed your tone of voice or whatever the case may be. And what you really should do is own up to it and apologize. I've had to do that before, and it's not the greatest feeling. It's a little embarrassing to go to somebody and say, hey, I'm sorry I was an asshole to you today. It's not your fault. Here's what was really going on. But you should do that because it'll really clear up if there is any underlying tension. It'll really resolve that and get you back to where you should be in that interpersonal relationship. And it'll also kind of gain you a level of respect and a bond with the other person because you were able to kind of humble yourself a little bit and say, you know, I know my actions weren't in accordance with the person that I want to be, and I didn't treat you the way you deserve to be treated. So here I am, man to man, apologizing to you because you deserve better, and I deserve better for myself. And there's something really empowering in that when you can rise above the initial level of embarrassment, because I feel like the embarrassment, it's coming from a place of insecurity. So you have to be able to escape that and kind of raise yourself to a higher plane of emotional intelligence and general consciousness to know, like, there's nothing to be embarrassed about, you know. There's nothing to be embarrassed about when you're owning up to your mistakes. You're being honest, you're being transparent, and that's admirable. So when you do find yourself in those situations, you know, sometimes, unfortunately, it might be unavoidable. Like I was saying earlier, like with me in the past, shit could still happen in the future where like something goes down and I have a quick split second reaction where I lose my head and I yell at somebody like, "What the fuck are you doing, yo?" Like, you know, just lose it and then, you know, come back to reality and then, all right, yo, my bad. I overreacted there, you know, and you can quickly walk it back. But sometimes it's going to be unavoidable. Sometimes you might just lose your cool, especially like if something messed up happens that it was totally unexpected, unprepared, you couldn't have prepared for it, you know, it's going to be difficult to maintain an even keel at times. So in those situations, you have to be able to understand and not be embarrassed to apologize and come clean. Well, yeah, come clean, I guess. That's not really what I wanted to say there, but we'll keep it rolling. So going forward, the second half of this video, I have a metaphor that I want to discuss, and I find it to be a kind of high-level metaphor. I'm hoping that someone in the comments, or some people in the comments ideally, will chime in and say whether or not I'm making sense, whether or not this resonates with them, whether or not it's a good system to gauge your emotions and quantify on a scale how you're feeling. So to begin, I want to kind of explain this idea that I really like, and it's called consilience. And what it means is, or at least my understanding of it is, the kind of blending of one discipline into another. Like the material sciences, the natural sciences, they display consilience very well, like biology into chemistry, into physics, you know, in ways of biology, for example, cell structures is a classic biological example. And within cells, there's chemical reactions, which leads into chemistry, but the chemical reactions are always controlled to execute in a certain fashion, which leads into the physics. And it all kind of blends from one to the other in a nice, clean fashion. And that's the idea of consilience. And a major issue with social sciences, and well, not an issue with social sciences, but there's a divide between the social sciences and the material sciences because there's no level of consilience. There's no branching point or connecting point, so to speak, where you can say, here's where the material sciences meet the social sciences in a way that's logical, adaptable. And if there were, the social sciences would be way more measurable and quantifiable in a way that they're not right now. And I think that's a shame, but I think it's out there. And this is my attempt at a certain level of consilience between the two. So within chemistry and physics, there's this concept of a dipole and a dipole moment. And, you know, I don't have a super strong science background, but I'm going to explain this to the best of my ability. And what a dipole is a system of opposing charges separated by some distance. And the charges, they're equal charges, equal and opposite. So on one end, you have a positive charge, and on the other end is a negative charge. And the system created by the two is the dipole. And the dipole moment is the vector. And if you guys seen Despicable Me, you should already know this. But the vector has direction and magnitude. So what that means is the dipole moment is a vector showing the direction and the magnitude being strength of the overall charge of the system, right? So the dipole, the dipole moment, it might indicate that the system is positively charged, or it's going in the positive direction with a certain strength. And unfortunately, that's kind of where my understanding stops as far as dipole moments. But it's an electrical system usually. Well, with system typically refer to something like a molecule, right? So anyway, if you want more, you should look it up. That's a really bare bones explanation, but at this time, it's the best I can do. So what I want to do with this metaphor is transpose it onto emotional states, in the sense that the dipole axis, the system of the positive and negative charge, is emotional states, but not your overall broad emotional state broken out into individual dipoles, emotional dipoles, right? So one, for example, could be elation or joy versus depression, which, you could break it down more simply into happiness versus sadness. You could do confidence versus fear. You could do anger versus calm, with obviously the more negative emotions that I just mentioned being corresponding with the negative charge, and the positive emotions corresponding with the positive charge. And if you're able to take your dipole moment of emotions on those scales, on those emotional dipoles that I just described, you can kind of determine your emotional state, your internal state, with, some level of scientific quantification. It's going to be imprecise because we don't have like real values. We can't say like with an electrical charge, there's values associated with that. So you can't say necessarily that I'm polarized in the direction of happiness with a charge of 3, like it's a little more abstract than that. But my idea here is that you could say, like, on the axis, on the dipole of happiness versus sadness, I'm trending towards happiness with a relative strength of 4 out of 10. Like, I'm not super happy, but I'm going in that direction, something like that. Or the other way around, like on the scale of calm to anger, something happens, it fucks up your day, and you can realize, all right, I'm trending from calm to angry with a strength of 6 out of 10. Like I'm kind of getting angry, not flying off the handle, which would be like a 9 or 10 out of 10, but 6 out of 10 means you're getting kind of hot. So, stuff like that. That's really I find it to be a very beautiful metaphor. I gotta say, I came up with this idea and I love it. So I hope other people, it'll resonate with them too. I found it to be profound and a somewhat simple example of consilience, of transposing an idea from the material sciences onto what I consider to be an aspect of the social sciences. And like I said, I find that to be both beautiful and profound. I feel like it's a very succinct metaphor. But anyway, I'll stop patting myself on the back. So back to the point, there's probably not an infinite, but countless number of those emotional dipoles. I mentioned 3 just to give you a little frame of reference, but there's so many different ones. So just if you're able to just determine one of like the happy to sad dipole moment, that's good, that's cool, but that's only part of the picture. You should, to really determine a clear interpretation of your entire emotional state, you would need to kind of get your dipole moment for a lot of those different factors. And then when you're able to do so, you would have a very complete picture of your emotional state. It'd be tangible, it'd be intelligible, it'd be interpretable, and you can really measure your reactions. And like I said at the beginning, you can control your emotions rather than them having control of you, because regardless of the internal storm, the tumultuous nature of your emotions, rapid fluctuations and oscillations occur with emotions all throughout the day. That's totally natural and normal, and by determining your dipole moments for these various emotional dipoles, you can maintain that outer facade of composure no matter what's going on inside, because you know where you're at. And like I said already, that'll help you measure your responses, and it'll help to kind of de-escalate if you do start trending a certain way. You can know how you're feeling, and you can kind of try and measure it out with other things that will help kind of move that charge back in the opposite direction rather than allowing it to become too polarized in one direction. And I think that's really powerful. I think, rather, like I said already, now I said it like 3 times, but rather than being controlled by your emotions, you're in control because you're the one doing the regulation. You can gauge where you're at, you can reset, and you can do things to move yourself in the direction that you want to go to, regardless of external factors. You have a level of control over yourself and over something that sometimes can seem hard to control, because it really can be. You know, when shit happens, it affects you, and that's unavoidable. But by determining your emotional dipole moments, you can gain back some level of control, and I feel like that's a really empowering idea. So honestly, that's really the basis of what I wanted to talk about today. Just, you know, to those of you out there, if you struggle with this, I've struggled with it in the past, and I'll wrap with an example from my life, which is something that I like to do. I should have brought it up earlier. What I like to do really is qualify what I talk about with emotion, or with examples rather, from my life. So literally yesterday, I had an example of this from my life, because it was snowing yesterday and I had a bunch of stuff I wanted to do. Like Saturday morning, today's Sunday, Saturday mornings I like to go for a run. I'm not necessarily a runner, but I'm trying to improve my cardiovascular endurance, you know, besides the point. But I like to go on a run on Saturday morning. I wanted to record this video yesterday. I also like to sometimes grab a coffee and do some work on my laptop at a coffee shop on Saturday for various other shit that I work on, you know. And I kind of have like this steady routine on Saturdays of first I do this, then I do that. And I like it. It's enjoyable. I have a lot of control over my day. And on the days that I don't work, I like to maintain that level of control and ensure that I'm doing the things that I want to do. I'm making a good use of my day off. I'm being productive, you know, and all the things that go with that. And the snow got in the way of that. And like, I had to get new tires on my car. I got new tires yesterday. And my parents were kind of like jocking me to get the new tires. And I didn't want to fucking do it. I didn't feel like doing it. I knew it was the right thing to do. But regardless, I didn't want to do it. So even though they had my best interests in mind, I was starting to get frustrated with their requests. And all they were trying to do was help me, right? And I had to kind of take my emotional dipole moment of the scale of frustration versus, I guess you could, I'm not quite sure what you would oppose frustration with. Maybe calmness, I guess. I already said calmness would go with anger, but you know, anger and frustration, they kind of go hand in hand. So I'm good with that. I'll put calmness in opposition to frustration. So I had to check my dipole moment there and realize, you know, the basis of my frustration is coming from the weather and the fact that I can't do the things that I want to do and I can't follow through with my normal routine. It has nothing to do with my parents, and all they want to do is help me and make sure that I'm safe in the winter weather and make sure that I'm able to, you know, drive my car and not be fucking sliding off the road into a ditch. They care about me, you know what I mean? So I had to make sure that I didn't end up taking that frustration out on them, and I let them know, like, hey, I'm a little out of it today. You know, the weather, like I said earlier, I love the snow, but I had a bunch of things that I wanted to do to it today. This is kind of getting in the way of them, and you know, like, we ended up getting the tires, and I was thankful for that, and just different things. And it ended up being a good day, but just at the beginning, I was in a funk a little bit, and I had to check my dipole moment on that scale and make sure that I came back to center rather than, or tried to polarize myself more in the calm direction rather than allowing frustration to take hold of the day and ruin a day that had no need to be ruined. And that's a level of emotional intelligence that I didn't have in the past. So I'm proud of myself for that. And, you know, hopefully there's something that you can take away from that, a lesson you can learn in that too. But anyway, that's just an example from my life. If there's anything I can leave you with, I would say, try not to project your internal states onto other people. Try to determine your dipole moment of emotions on as many scales, as many of those emotional dipole systems as you can. And I think it'll go a long way for you. I hope if you watch this video to the end, you drop a comment and let me know what you think of that metaphor. I think it's a good way to interpret emotions in a tangible fashion, and I hope you do too. So anyway, peace out, everybody. Enjoy the day, enjoy your life, spend some time outside, and thank you for tuning in.